Hi, everyone. My name is Julisa. I'm a trans woman of color, and today we are going to talk about LGBT and trans people specifically not having access to different resources and how that impacts housing. So, I'm going to give you a little context so you understand the work that I do and the marginalization that the LGBT community goes through, specifically trans individuals. So, I'm again from Detroit, Michigan, where we unfortunately have had an influx of murders with trans women of color. In 2016, our now Attorney General Dana Nessel and Kim Worthy, which is our prosecutor, put together a task force to combat crimes against the LGBT community and specifically trans murders. To date, we've done 35 assaultive cases with 100% conviction rate. When we started in Wayne County. Now we are in Wayne County, Oakland County, Washtenaw County, and Ingham County. We're the first in the nation to have a trans inclusion policy. What that means is whether your name is legally changed or not, when you come to court to testify or report a crime to law enforcement, we still have to address you by your preferred name and pronouns. While that doesn't seem like it's monumental to people that it doesn't affect, it has changed the culture and the dynamic between community and police in building trust. It also has given us statistics on what actually happens to trans individuals, not only that experience violence, but that don't have access to shelter systems and experience homelessness. A lot of trans individuals don't have access to shelter systems and homelessness, particularly here in Detroit, especially trans women of color. A lot of the community is marginalized and put out at astronomical rates. If you live in an at-will state like Michigan, we can be discriminated against when it comes to resources like housing, employment, healthcare, and all of those things that are life-saving and monumental. Unfortunately, a lot of my community specifically doesn't know the importance of voting either. Only come out and vote when it is a presidential election, as opposed to electing the people in the seats of the states that we live in, which is so important. Here in Michigan, we have a governor by the name of Governor Gretchen Whitmer, that is an ally and really inclusive for LGBT needs. He's changing the dynamic here, and we're trying to change the legislative with Elliot Larson to include protections for sexual orientation and gender identity. Our now Attorney General, which is Dana Nessel, is who started and funded the Fair Michigan Justice Project. Our Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, has made it possible for trans individuals and non-binary individuals to change their IDs to reflect the gender that they want it to. Previously in Michigan, we had to have gender reassignment surgery for that to even be possible. Now, all you need is a letter from your therapist. You go to the Secretary of State, pay a fee of $9, and you can have documentation that night. We're able to change our birth certificates as well. Having people in the seats that believe in the things that you believe in is astronomical for the state that you live in. I'm not telling you who to vote for. All I'm telling you is to do your research and vote for the people that you believe do the best work for you. When it comes to housing, for trans individuals, not having an ID is life-saving and monumental, even for the little things that you think about. When we experience homelessness and you live in an urbanized or rural community and you're transgender, a lot of people don't feel comfortable in coming out because of the social stigma, the climate that we live in, politics, whether it's family, whether it's religious reasons, whether it's just safety and possibility, right? So if you go to, in Detroit, if you go to support groups for trans women of color, particularly at these LGBT or homeless shelters, they give you a $25 food voucher that you can use at a grocery store, at a convenience store in one of our areas. If you're a trans woman of color and you present it to somebody that's not culturally competent or biased, and you present like myself, but your name, for example, is Robert Smith, now you've been put in an uncomfortable position where now you are unsafe. You might have to walk home, you might not have access to public transportation, and you might not even feel comfortable to use daily accommodations such as a bathroom for safety reasons. Having documentation that matches is so important when it comes to being able to get education, get employment, and most importantly, housing. If we have documentation that matches, not only will we be housed with gender accordingly to how we live, but we'd be in safe environments. Here in Michigan, through the Fair Michigan Justice Project, I realized how important it was to start those things, right? So I reached out to Ford Motor Company, GM Motor Company, and Decima Law Firm. I've spearheaded a name change program for trans individuals here in Michigan, where up to date, I've helped 209 trans individuals legally change their name with no cost to them. When people get married, it's so easy to just go to a court system and change your name. People don't understand that for trans individuals in every state, the cost and the procedure looks different. So here in Michigan, you have to do a publication fee, a filing fee, and if you have to have an attorney represent you just for having a ticket or a criminal background, you're looking at least $1,500. A lot of marginalized people, especially trans women that are doing survival sex work, don't have access to those funds. Another thing is we are trying to change what it looks like here in Michigan, because again, every state is different with the name change process. So here in Michigan, you have to publicize your name. Publicizing your name in the legal newspaper is unsafe for trans individuals, particularly trans women that already experience violence at astronomical rates. So if somebody's out trying to target my community, all you have to do is look in the legal newspaper, see where we live, what our dead name was, and what the name that we're now choosing. So I'm trying to change what those policies look like here in Michigan. Trans people not having documentation is like monumental, right? So another example, if you go to a doctor's office that is not culturally competent and your name is not legally changed and you want trans affirming healthcare, you go to the front, they call you by your dead name. If you live again in a rural area or an urbanized space, you might not feel comfortable getting up and even going to your appointment because now you're in an unsafe position. So it's really important for all of us to have access to be able to change all of our documentation in a way that we all can afford it. Beyond the publication fee, trans individuals have to go to court. Not in every state do you have to even make a court appearance. Because of the pandemic, a lot of our court appearances here in Detroit have been through Zoom, luckily, which has been very monumental for my community. When the Zoom pandemic is officially over and we have to go back, not every trans individual has accommodations to be able to get to court, has the fees to be able to get there, or again, can even get on public transportation because of the safety that they face. So I want to be able to eradicate some of those laws here in Michigan to be able to continue to do this name change program. The way I've been able to be successful and make this work is I've applied for different grants for trans specific funding that fund the kind of work that I do, and that is how I'm able to cover the legal fees. I also have a GoFund where every year I do a coat drive for trans individuals. People can donate for there as well. And then some of those costs go as well to covering the legal fees and the filing fees that some of these trans individuals have to have for their name change. Another component that I learned through the name change program is unfortunately a lot of trans individuals cannot get their name changed, which would then lead them to not being able to get housing and fair resources because they had low level non-violent offenses. And what that looks like, I'll give you an example for a trans individual. So you live in Detroit, you already have to experience homelessness and survival sex work. So you do have a car that you live in, you drive around and you're trying to finagle through life. You get pulled over, you don't have insurance. You get a ticket. This time, they luckily let you keep your car because it's wintertime. Of course, we know I'm not going to stop driving. So I continue to drive to try to make ends meet. And I get pulled over again and I get another ticket. My car gets impounded. I'm able to get the money to get my car impounded, but the tickets aren't a priority for me right now. Now I get another ticket and now there's a warrant for my arrest. Well, now I identify with being trans. I want to get my name changed. It's been 2 years. I haven't been caught, even though I've been driving around with this warrant. And now they run into me. Unfortunately, I can't take you to court because if I take you to court, you're going to get arrested because you have a warrant. So I applied again for another grant with the University of Michigan here, and I'm so grateful and humbled that they have partnered with me. And we have a pilot program where we have a program for 5 trans women of color that have low-level nonviolent offenses, and that looks like anything from solicitation to tickets to open containers to maybe being out after dark. And what we do is pay a defense attorney that goes to court with them. We work with the judges. They know the kind of program that I have. Again, I can't make every judge not have their own biases or be culturally competent. But so far, the program has been working. They've allowed a lot of the trans individuals to be able to rectify it with community service and paying the fees. And because I was able to secure grant funding, some of the girls that have even had to turn themselves in, we've had the money to pay their bond right then and there. So where they're out within the next 2 hours, we make an agreement with their attorneys. We have 5 of them. One of them has already been completed. Her name change date is February 21st. So I'm really, really proud that the program has been successful. And doing things like that and putting trans individuals in positions to navigate what it is that we already know that we go through is so monumental. And I think that in every state and every organization, they should hire people that look like us, that reflect us. I'm not the only competent person. There's so many trans women of color that can do such amazing things but aren't given the opportunities and maybe don't even know their own worth or their own light at the tunnel because they haven't been given the opportunities that I have. So I really, really hope that from this conversation, we've been able to learn how to make it a little accessible and easier for people to have resources so that they can have housing, a better life for all of us, including trans individuals. And I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
This is all so interesting, Julisa. I feel like my head is spinning in regards to questions to ask you, but I'm curious, any of the Housing Justice team members, if anything is coming up for you, any responses or questions for Julisa?
I have a question. You may have already addressed it. I know you mentioned being able to get name changes for trans people who have low-level nonviolent crimes. Is that possible for trans people who may have like a felony? Like I know in Illinois, they just passed a bill where if you're a trans person and you have a felony on your record, um, and you want to change your name, you can, whereas before you couldn't, and that would live on your record even though you transitioned and everything. Is
So
there
to answer your question,
yeah,
yes, you can. Anywhere here you can. To have a felony, you can. All you have to do is prove that you're going through here in Detroit. So I'm speaking from a Detroit perspective. Prove that you're going through obviously the processes of transitioning and prove that you're not changing your name for fraudulent or illegal purposes. Now, because of the partnerships that I have right now, because obviously it's all still brand new, we only do low-level nonviolent offenses, so they wouldn't be able to go through my program, but they still would be able to get their name changed if they were to go through the normal processes.
thank you.
Very
Also,
welcome.
like I said, I don't know if you read in the chat, but like I said, you did awesome job.
Thank you.
And um, yes, that's all.
Thank you.
Seeing a question in the chat. Lex says, in regards to if you had any help with pitching your pilot program or if you've been doing all of the outreach on your own, has anyone got out of their way to help your work, or has anyone purposely denied your work because of our community?
So if we're gonna have an honest conversation, I don't. So yes, I've done it all on my own. Through the work at Fair Michigan and the prosecutor's office, I went up to them and told them that because my name has been changed, I would think it was astronomical if we can help our community. Originally, we only had a set budget to help like 10 trans women. When I realized how much it costs, I started Googling law firms. And because of the work I do, I realized that big corporations have big law firms that do things pro bono. All you have to do is run into a person that is an ally and that believes in our work. And I don't ever take no for an answer. So whenever someone tells me no, I always just feel like I was talking to the wrong person and I just need to wait a few days and then try somebody else. There has been people that after I've started the work, like Ford, they've been so gracious. I'm so humble. After I worked with them one time, they've like offered me their services 3 other times. They've been so great to my community here. But if we have an honest conversation, I wish that it would change as a community. No one has stopped my work because of our community, except my own community. But I also kind of understand why. I think because sometimes and this is why I say it's so important for us to have representation, trans people don't get representation and don't get the same advantages as everybody else that when a trans person does, sometimes we gatekeep how we're able to maneuver or work. There's also a lot of things that we don't talk about in the trans community or even in the African American community that exists, which is colorism and passability and just the advantages that sometimes people don't like you for that have nothing to do with you doing nothing other than wanting to make the world better for everybody. But sometimes those people don't realize the bigger picture, if that makes sense. So yes, sometimes it's been our own community, which is unfortunate, but I really want everyone to have the same opportunities and be able to win and thrive. Any other questions?
I think that's such a good point,
Oh,
Julisa. Yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
sorry. I was wondering, so the trans people you help, do they have to be over a certain age, like 18 and over, or can they be under 18 or minors?
So they can be a minor and they go through the court system with their parent for legality reasons. And because I can't do anything with the minor without parent consent anyways, my program starts at 18 just because I don't want to have any legality issues and it's worked beautifully. So yes, my program starts at 18 to whatever age. It doesn't matter what race you are, what gender you are, like you identify with being trans, non-binary, you can get your name changed.
Yeah, it's such a good point. It's so nice to hear from you because I think like obviously for cisgender people, I think that there's a real lack of awareness as to something, the power that something like a name change clinic has, or the power that something like helping trans people have access to the things that they need can have, which is why it's so important to like hear directly from trans people about the kinds of things that would be helpful in like in putting one foot in front of the other, in living your life day to day. And so I just like am experiencing such deep gratitude for you for sharing your expertise in this realm. Yeah, and I'm curious, like when we think about like service providers, like homeless service providers or funders, like thinking about these groups of people, I'm curious about like behavior change, like what kinds of different things, different ways do you want to see people show up to this work to better support trans people?
Just educating yourself that like I'm part of the LGBT community, but I only can speak from a trans perspective. And I feel like acronyms are always being added and things are always being added. And I'm an advocate. I don't pretend to know everything. So I always try to like educate myself. But one of the most important things is not making an assumption, right? For whatever you think a trans person is supposed to look like, take that out of your mind. Trans people experience homelessness at higher rates. We are kicked out of our house at higher rates. A lot of trans women of color they might be homeless and do survival sex work. They might not have access to a shower and razors or the things that they need to authentically be themselves. Not every trans person wants to be on hormones. Not every trans person wants to have surgery and augment their bodies the way I have. So like just in asking somebody as simply, what is your preferred name and what are your pronouns? If they don't know, they're going to ask you what the hell that means. If they are part of my community and they might have been reluctant to talk to you, it lets them know that when you see them, when you hear them, and that when you're an ally. So we should never make an assumption that anybody is cis and trans. Everyone that I introduce myself to, I always tell them my pronouns. I always start with, hey, my name is Julisa Bad. My pronouns are she, her, hers. What are your pronouns and what do you want me to call you? After they say, what do you want me to call you? Then you can ask them anything further. And another thing with my community is we know when someone's trying to be malicious and when you genuinely made a mistake. If you misgender somebody or make a mistake or don't know, apologize, correct yourself, and move forward and be intentional and not making that mistake again. Lupita, I see you have a question.
I do. So I was recently having conversation and someone told me not to say what are your preferred pronouns because it assumes that it's a choice as opposed to the way you were born. Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
It
So to just
does.
say what is your pronoun as opposed to your preferred pronoun? Is that
So I'm gonna be honest. So we live in a world where everybody gets offended, right? And we kind of are scared now to like say anything that has to do with like race or transness or so personally, I don't get offended by what is your preferred pronoun. I've always heard people say, what is your preferred pronoun? But what is your pronoun is no different. So if that makes them more comfortable, I'm completely fine with what are your pronouns, because then we're not using the word preferred and we're still getting the same language across. So we can just say, what are your pronouns? And then start with telling them what your pronouns are.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other question?
Hunter in the chat, I'm curious how you describe the name change clinic and this work and the connection to housing justice or the pursuit of liberation. Are you muted, Julisa?
No, I was rereading the question. I'm a processor, so I have to reread so I understand. And I'm bilingual, so everything hits me in Spanish first, and then I have to like convert it to English. So give me 2 seconds. Okay, well, they connect because ultimately we're fighting for the same thing, which is equal access to something that we are lacking, right? Whether that's education, whether that's housing, whether that's the ability to be our authentic self so that we can reach housing, education, and all of those things. How is it for me? The pursuit of liberation is when you actually have those things. I, for so long, dreamed of it and didn't realize until I had it myself how much easier it is to navigate through life to get things without having to be questioned. I'll give you a perfect example of what happened today as opposed to what has happened in the past. So my ID says what it says, it has my gender marker, and it says everything that it's me to. So I went to a clinic before for something that ultimately, a health procedure that would ultimately be for a girl, which is a mammogram, right? But I have breast tissue and breast. So when I went the first time, and this was years ago when my name did not reflect what it needed to, it was the most horrible, horrible experience. And I wasn't the poised Julisa that I am now. So instead of advocating, it was like, oh, I'm going to tear this doctor's office up, right? Because I didn't know how to like articulate and do policy changes. So now that my ID is changed and I went, they don't question why you're trans and you need a mammogram. They literally just looked at the name, looked at the ID, didn't question twice, didn't misgender me, didn't say a crazy name, didn't make everybody come from behind the counter and glare and look at me like I was a science experiment. And just to be able to navigate in life and do normal things that people take for granted, like sit in a place with a million people or pump gas and know that you're not going to be violently assaulted or beat up, is like the best feeling in the world. And to know that same thing with my lease and my bank accounts and everything. Lord forbid I get locked out of my house. My ID reflects the way I look. It has the name that I have. I don't have to get into an argument with them or explain my transness or why this name says this, but they're calling me this. And to have keys to my own safe space, which is my sanctuary, is the best feeling in the world.
Thanks for answering that, Julisa, and thank you for that question, Hunter. Any follow-ups there? Or any questions from other folks?
Y'all been great.
I know you've been getting all kinds of validation in the chat, Julisa. And I know you've talked to this group a little bit before about just kind of what it's like to hold the front of this work and to kind of the dual nature of having to talk about these things all the time and to constantly educate other people. And I just want to acknowledge that here because I know you bring just so much expertise to this group. And I know that your words here will echo beyond just this group. But I have, just such gratitude for you for sharing your experience and your expertise here.
Thank you. I genuinely love all of y'all and respect all of y'all so much. And I'm so proud to be part of it. So thank y'all.